So welcome everybody. I'm so delighted to offer this patron-only event, an opportunity for you to ask me anything. Now, normally I'm such a control freak, that's a little hard for me to let go. But I'm so curious to hear the direction that the questions will take us this evening. I'm sort of open to answering questions on anything, so let me know, and we can dive right in. We may have some more people jumping on as we go on, but I don't want to keep you waiting because you guys are here on time. So yes, you're welcome to ask your questions either directly to me on video if you feel comfortable doing that, or you can put them in the chat and I will keep them anonymous. Okay, first question. When it comes to teaching NeoTantra and Kink to folks who are curious, who have been your biggest influences and why? Probably specifically putting those two things together, which often don't go together. You know, I get a lot of flack for teaching them together, actually, but I'm fine with that. I would say Barbara Carrellis was probably one of the biggest influences there. Her book, Urban Tantra, is really wonderful. I got to do her professional training program, and I was maybe a year or two into doing this full time. And I loved the way both Barbara deconstructed gender. Barbara's partner is very, very openly trans, and Barbara doesn't prescribe to the typical, things have to be masculine and feminine. You know, it's fine if you resonate with that, but for example, for me, I don't believe just in the gender binary. And then for me, a lot of what NeoTantra is about has to do with energy. And so if let's just take something simple that many people have experienced, like spanking. Well, here's another influence, actually. So she's another Urban Tantra professional training graduate, but Eve Minax, I'll put her name, Eve Minax. Trying to type and talk is a little tricky. I believe her website is eveminax.com, but if you just Google her, you'll find her. She's wonderful. And she came to teach basic bondage, like I think a chest harness in the class. And she did it from the perspective of opening up the heart chakra, like literally pulling on the chest harness. Yeah, and it was really beautiful. Really, really beautiful. Welcome. And so one of the things she talks about when she teaches spanking is she talks about putting energy into the body. And I love that. So when I teach, loving some of the comments in the chat, I'm not going to read them all off, but I love it that we're talking even as we're sharing. Yes, if you think of spanking, you can think about one person doing something to another person. But if you really think about it energetically, if you're taking energy, be it dominant energy or just the energy in your system, and putting that, let's imagine you're spanking an ass into someone's ass, it really changes the experience for both the spanker and the spankee. And welcome if you've just joined us. And what I like about that so much is that now we're not just focusing on the hedonism of the experience, we're actually focusing on the intimacy and the connection. And we're focusing on the energetics between the two partners. And I can literally tell somebody who has been trained by Minax in spanking and somebody who hasn't. I've told her this in the past, and she loves knowing that. But you can just have somebody wail on you and there can be no connection, or you can really get intimately connected to you can put the intention of love into that spanking, right? So when I teach my my black diamond ritual. I had to think of that's changed names a few times, but which is a fusion of NeoTantra and Kink. We bring this aspect of devotion into the dominance and submission, into any impact play we do. And it's actually really potent. So the way I like to teach NeoTantra has a lot to do with using pleasure as an access point for transformation. So there's nothing wrong with pleasure for pleasure's sake, but I'm actually doing all these practices, including Kink, as a consciousness raising experience, not just purely a hedonistic exercise. Nothing wrong with pleasure. Pleasure is beautiful, but I like inviting people even deeper. So have I answered your question well enough, or is there more to that? I mean, I could talk all night just on that question, but yeah, I interviewed a few months ago, and he's actually coming back. I haven't even announced it yet. I've got Lee Harrington coming to talk to the patrons in July. I just got approval for the graphic, so I'll put that out soon. But Lee's really wonderful. For example, he wrote a book called Sacred Kink, which I love, and I've got to attend rituals with him when I've either attended or taught at Dark Odyssey Surrender, which I know some of the people on this call are familiar with that that event. And just watching how he held ritual and how he took a bunch of kinksters into a deeply ceremonial space. So Dark Odyssey Surrender also does this beautiful fusion of kink and spirituality. And I really love it that they get me to come and lead ritual and often be people's first introduction to NeoTantra. So I think there are a few people doing it. I'd also mention, I interviewed them recently. I beg your pardon. They transitioned their genders. Oh, and the kitty cat that's adopted me that you've heard, many of you have heard of me complaining about on Facebook, has come to visit. But Z Gris, formerly Zahava Gris, is also just the way they speak about kink. They use it kind of as a portal to something deeper. And that resonates a lot with me. So all the names I've listed, I've been inviting Barbara for ages. So if you guys are interested, you can put it in the comments. Maybe now that the pandemic isn't so crazy, Barbara will be a yes, but I'd love to have her come on and talk to us because she's amazing. So so I'm taking questions from anybody. You can choose either to put them in the chat, or if you wanted to unmute yourself. And oh, now the cat really wants to be on the video too. Sorry, I was not expecting that cameo. They like the good energy, you see. But so you could pop a question in the chat if you feel too shy to come on camera, if you want to remain anonymous. Who else did I say? I said Barbara Corellis, Lee Harrington, and Z Gris. I'll put Z's name there for you. You can find them under Body Think of Z's website. Yeah. So the floor is open. You get to use me how you choose. Oh yes, and of course Lee. Of course Lee. Yeah, feel free to unmute if you'd like to share, Naomi. Oh, no worries at all. No worries. Well, I'm waiting for a question. I'm going to put my head down so that you can see the gorgeous sea view. Oh my God. I love this view so much. Oh, can you please explain the 4 abodes of the heart exercise? This question, Inga, I want to ask, is this a question from when you first got to practice with me, when we first met?
I think it was an exercise that I began to do with Francesca when she taught that class in NeoTantra, and it was at a con, like, I don't remember which one, probably Dark Odyssey.
We taught together at, gotta think, Folsom Fringe. I think that's,
Okay.
yeah. Anyway, that was really her exercise, and it's from, I think it might be from a Buddhist lineage, and I just don't know. So I don't want to speak to, I just don't want to speak to something I don't know about. But thank you so much for your question. Please do go and ask Francesca, because yeah, I'm sure she would have plenty to say.
I've forgotten, I can't remember what the 4 abodes of the heart are and what each of them mean. Some of them are self-explanatory, but I don't remember exactly how it's sort of like when you're connecting with your partner and doing the eye gazing, and then you recognize them as a being that contains the 4 abodes of the heart, and you honor each way that they inhabit those abodes of the heart. That's all I know.
Well, I've heard both Francesca teach on it and also a teacher called Dawn Cartwright, but just not an aspect that I'm trained in. So, yeah,
that's fine. I
get to admit my humanness here too. I'm going to go to another question that asks, oh, wow, this is a big question. Okay, so what is the difference between classical Tantra and then NeoTantra versus Bhakti Yoga? Wow. Oh, this is like a minefield question. So, yes, it's a very big question. So I'm going to do my best to explain it in as tangible a way as I possibly can. And I may not give the perfect textbook answers. And I even imagine that some people would disagree with the way I answer the question. But I'm interested in my alignment with myself and with God or Goddess. So I will very humbly do my best. So let's start with Bhakti Yoga. And Bhakti Yoga, we could do a whole teaching just on that, but is the yoga of love and the yoga of devotion. And that sounds all like, like rainbows and unicorns, but it's actually, at its essence, quite a deep practice. And many people first experience anything related to Bhakti Yoga often through chanting mantra meaning a tool for the mind. And often this is accessible, especially to Westerners, through the practice of kirtan. Notice my pronunciation. Some of you might have seen my Facebook thread about the word chakra versus chakra. No such thing. Chakra. So a kirtan, I had to start saying it properly after I was in India and I said kirtan, and they were like, what are you even talking about? No Indian person knew what I was meaning. And then they were like, oh, kirtan. So kirtan is call and response chanting. And normally the leader would sing a line, and then the audience or the participants would sing the line back. And you kind of, in India, it's often done as an oral tradition. And it's, according to the Krishna devotees, all that's required is to chant the divine names. So that's quite a statement in this age of Kali Yuga, that the only thing we have to do is chant the divine names. So in some ways that kind of takes us off the hook. But Bhakti Yoga is much broader than just this. So that might be the hook. But Bhakti Yoga includes things like Shravanam, which means to listen. So when the kirtan leader sings a line, you are listening. And then another aspect of Bhakti Yoga is for you to chant the mantra. Now, in general, I encourage beginners especially to chant the mantra out loud, to activate the throat chakra, to empower your voice, and to give you permission to sing. A lot of people are scared to chant in, this weird Sanskrit language. Like, what is this? Can I do this? But it gives you something to focus on. And I think of the third eye here, because that's kind of where I hold the mantra. That's nothing anybody ever taught me or told me. That's just what I do in my practice. And another aspect of Bhakti Yoga is, for example, listening to katha, listening to the stories about the deities or about the guru or about the saints, right? And I guess I was like, who are my favorite storytellers? Jayutal is actually probably one of my favorite storytellers. If you want to get a sampling of him, you could go to his YouTube channel. He actually does a really beautiful video that's much more eloquent than I'm going to be tonight, explaining what Bhakti Yoga is. But it's really also about developing a relationship with the deity. So you can be friends with the deity. You could be lovers with the deity. It could be your child, like Gopala, the form of Krishna and Gopala, is a baby. Or they could be your husband or your wife, right? But it's about creating this very personal relationship. And my teacher, Gina Salah, who I went to India with for the first time, she said, you can sprinkle bhakti onto anything. And I love that. I love that. So that's kind of like, you can bring bhakti. This is a great example. So I interviewed Nubia Teixeira recently, and she came to talk about mudras and bhakti and yoga. And what she does is she brings a lot of bhakti into her, I'm going to say yoga practice. What I mean by that is the body postures. So her hatha yoga practice, she puts bhakti into it. She emphasizes it by using the mudras that she's learned in Odissi, which is a classical style of Indian dance. So, the way you dress, I know I've spoken about this before, even the way you dress can be an expression of your devotion. Often the way the women dress in India, they dress to the nines. Even if they only have one really fancy sari, they will, if they are going to the temple, they dress beautifully because that's part of their devotion. That's a little sprinkling of Bhakti Yoga. Then NeoTantra. Wow. I am in a very deep journey. I have been throughout this pandemic of really understanding at a deeper level what NeoTantra is and how it's walked out in the world. So I'm going to explain how I do it, and it may not be the same as how others do it. And I'm sort of emphasizing that point because I'll let you guys into a secret that I've become very disillusioned with the NeoTantra world during the pandemic. And the reason for this is I'm seeing, I'm glad that, I'm glad to feel the solidarity, and I'm also, like, it's sad for me. There's been a deep grieving going on. It's a lot of what I'm doing in Mexico is like processing this. But it's kind of good how I framed the conversation from the beginning, that for me, this really is about waking up and being more conscious, whether I'm in a dungeon or whether I'm, or the cat that adopted me, I should say, keeps bringing me dead birds and put a dead rat at my front door 2 mornings ago. And oh goodness. And I didn't have the bandwidth yesterday to deal with the rat. And I came out this morning and it had gone further and decapitated the the whole rat. And yes, I keep getting this feedback that the cat really loves me, and this is so not the way that I want to be loved. But if, as Ram Das and Krishna Das, who are teachers of mine, relay back to us from Maharaji, from Neem Karoli Baba, everything, everybody is your guru, right? To love everyone. So I'm in the inquiry, like, what is the cat trying to teach me? What is it about death? This is getting really deep, but like, what is it about death that I don't want to look at? Because it's the cat's nature. And I apparently, yes, it's trying to be nice. I keep trying to say, like, kill the rat, just eat it. Like, use it if you're going to take a life. And I'm really glad that the cat has switched up to rats now, because I love the birds. And I don't want the birds killed. The rats I don't mind so much. I just don't want them at my front door. But isn't it interesting how that actually can become a deep teaching? So if we stay curious, like, so what is this? What is it confronting in me? I'm sort of bridging in some classical tantric teachings here. The classical tantrikas are not about orgasms. Not that they never are into orgasms, but that is not the main goal. It's not all about navel gazing and blissing out and just having a fun time. And that's been some of my disillusionment with the neo-tantrics in the pandemic, because many of them are still teaching. I have friends and colleagues that are still teaching. Some of you have read my rants on Patreon about that. But like, it hurts me. If we are really going to namaste and bow to each other, like, are we doing that just out of ritual or out of, at the very worst extreme, out of cultural appropriation? Or are we actually honoring the divine in each other? And if we are, like, it's part of why I'm not going to be teaching in person, except perhaps in Mexico, because I have this very nice big outdoor space. But I'm really not going to teach in California until 2022. Because when I spoke to my friend in Delhi, like, he says the numbers are so miscounted in India that like over 1 million people, he reckons, and he's in the medical field, his family are doctors. He's like at least 1 million people have died, and they're about to have a third wave again. So where is the consciousness in that is sort of the inquiry I've been in. But in general, getting off my soapbox for a moment, in general, Neo-Tantra is practiced in the West. It has a focus on breath, sound, and movement. It was popularized initially by Osho and Margot Anand, and then one of the other big or well-known teachers is Charles Muir. I have a lot to say about Charles Muir. Please do not study with him. He literally rapes his students. That is a strong thing to say, but I've spent a lot of years in advocacy, so I want to, you're my patrons, stay there. I can send you links if you're curious to know more about that. But we really want to watch, because whenever we deviate from source tradition, now we don't have all those years, right? Neo-Tantra is actually relatively new. Let's imagine it started, say, in the 70s. And there's nothing wrong. Part of why I got into Neo-Tantra was because sexuality was such a big part of my life. And I didn't, the Christian church kept telling me if I wasn't married, I couldn't have sex. And they wanted to literally kick me out of the church. And I was like, well, if that's your deal breaker, I'll just go. Because it's fine that doesn't work for you, but I've tried not having sex and that's not working for me. And I also just don't get how, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with Christianity. I'm saying for me, I wanted to use all aspects of life, be it sexuality or mantra or kink or, whatever else, as an aspect of devotion. That feels very integrated to me. So there's this big focus on sexuality in Neo-Tantra, but that's created a very interesting conundrum in the pandemic as well. Because, now I'm getting really intimate with my patrons, but right at the beginning of the pandemic, maybe like a couple of weeks in, I ended up ending the connection I had. I was seeing somebody in Santa Cruz, actually. And we ended things because his choices around the pandemic were not in alignment with mine, which was fine, but just it wasn't safe enough. And so what does NeoTantra? How do we practice NeoTantra if we're not being sexual? Because I don't have a live-in partner, right? So, and then I've come to Mexico, and people here are not, it's very difficult for them to get vaccinated, and it's a totally different, we're very blessed in the United States to be able to have access to vaccines. And now I'm in a developing country. So then I have to look at the risk, the risk benefits. And so I've chosen mostly to be in connection with myself and nature. Right? So some of you may have seen, I posted a video yesterday. I was snorkeling and swimming with dolphins. And I was like, I didn't realize at the time, I was just having my very effusive expression of joy. But it sounded quite orgasmic, actually. I was making all these incredible sounds. And that's come from learning to sound in NeoTantra, right? So my experience of all these practices is, it feels like it's getting an even deeper integration. And I think my own work will change as a result of a lot of this. But I would just invite that while there's nothing wrong with sexuality, if we are just there purely to get off, and if we are just there to have a big peak experience, I really think we are missing a whole aspect of the practice. That's why I say I love pleasure as an access point for transformation. So what I like to invite students into is, if we're using sexuality as part of our sadhana, as part of our practice, right? Where is it taking us? How much deeper is it creating our connection to ourselves, our partners, and the divine? How much is it actually raising our consciousness? Neem Karoli Baba was famous for saying, when his devotees, his Western devotees, came to him and said, how do we raise Kundalini? He said, love people. They're like, no, really. How do you raise Kundalini? Feed people. And that's spirituality in action. And I love that. He didn't say go off to a cave somewhere and like meditate, because that's, again, I'm not knocking sadhus or anything, but like it's kind of an easy way. You don't have to be confronted with people or traffic or kids or, the challenges of everyday life. So I'll jump off now and start talking a little bit about classical tantras. That was the other part of the question. And so I want to share that I am authorized to teach NeoTantra, and I weave in aspects of classical Tantra. I practice quite a lot of classical Tantra in my personal life, but I'm not initiated by a guru and authorized to teach classical Tantra. So just to be, for whoever ends up seeing this video beyond just this evening. But part of, maybe I'll give a rounder answer to this. So I was in a very public call out a few years ago, I'm guessing 3 or 4 years ago, where I was being called out for cultural appropriation. There's a lot of appropriation in NeoTantra. They pull things, that they don't really understand. Even words like lingam and yoni and amrita. Like the Westerners would say, amrita can be female ejaculation, but not everybody. Yes, and they steal from shamanism. They kind of just, the West loves this. They just like pull a little mishmash and then they put it together. And there are some very well-known public schools that teach this fusion of sexuality and shamanism. Now, I'm not opposed to shamanism as a practice per se. I work with a shaman and I'm slowly starting to develop those techniques. But most people running around saying that they're shamans, like hanging their, a shingle, there we go, on the door, on the wall or whatever, like I would run a mile away. Go and ask people about their training. That is like the first thing. Who trained you? So the particular school that I'm imagining one of you is alluding to, I know their training. They didn't even study with a shaman. So the founder of the organization. And the founder also studied with Charles Muir, which is problematic in its own thing. I also studied with Charles Muir, and I've spent the last few years unlearning a lot of what was taught. So classical Tantra is something quite different. It originates from India, and it actually started before Hatha Yoga. Hatha Yoga was like the sort of the dumbed down version, the anesthetized version of Tantra Yoga. And classical Tantra refers to a few things, including the Tantric texts, where specific rituals and practices are written down. And an interesting thing happens. We explore this a lot, by the way, in my teacher training. We go and look at this, and I actually bring in different teachers. The last time I taught it, I brought in Ekabumi Elek. So those of you who are meeting him for the, hearing about him for the first time. Ekabumi Elek is a dear friend of mine. He's a very hardcore classical tantrika. He's the one that helped me learn so much about what I was doing wrong and how to we literally pulled the words puja and tantra apart for ages just for me to get ready to change them in my work. He was one of the ones presenting on Clubhouse when you attended the other day. Yeah, just to help you orient. Anyway, so in classical Tantra, it's incredibly complicated. And I say that because what I've noticed as I deepen my practice is that the complexity in Hinduism, and that's the form of classical Tantra that I practice. There's also Buddhist, and I just don't know as much about that. But the intricacy continues to invite you deeper because you're sort of never at the end of the journey of getting it all. So it includes things like puja meaning to worship, where the deity is the central focus of the practice. You might offer flowers and or mantra and incense and food, and there's a very specific order in the way you would do it. And some pujas have 16 elements or 32, or they're all these very specific things. But the main focus is not on another person. Again, it is the deity, either in the form of a yantra, which is a geometric representation of the deity, or a picture of the deity, or the mantra. All those forms, in a sense, for our purposes, are interchangeable. And people are practicing, some of them, for some pretty serious things. Some practitioners that I know are practicing for full realization in this lifetime. So Hindus believe there's reincarnation, and really hardcore practitioners are this is it. I want to merge with the goddess, if you're practicing with Shakta tradition. Yes, I'll come back to that in a moment. I love it that the questions are coming thick and fast. Oh, and I thank you for that reference for the Sri Vidya Tantra by, I hope I'm going to say this right, Kavita Chinayan. I hope I said that right. Okay. But think of Tantra as a text. Think of Tantra as a prescription of rituals that is normally passed down from guru to disciple. I have a guru in Varanasi that I go and sit with, and once it's safe to do so, when would it have happened? Oh yeah, last year in October, I was going to take a group on yatra, on a spiritual pilgrimage to India, to go and sit with some of my teachers there, my bhakti teachers and my classical tantric teachers. Now, it's not that they will never talk about sex, because there is sexual sadhana, there are sexual practices, but you have to do so much work before you are even introduced to those things. And this is where the NeoTantrics can get it a little wrong sometimes, is that even people that are teaching can lose connection either to spirit or to the energy. And the main focus then revolves around the pleasure. Now, again, nothing wrong with pleasure, but what are you practicing for? Are you practicing just to feel good, or are you practicing to wake up? I am practicing not for full realization in this lifetime, because I want to be able to swim with dolphins and travel and hug trees and stuff. I don't want to do 6 hours of practice a day. So, but I do want to become more conscious. Yeah, and then an important thing to say is just because you read a tantra, it does not mean that if you follow the prescribed rituals, welcome. If you follow the prescribed rituals exactly as the text says, that you will have perfect results. You will often hear properly trained classical tantrikas warn you about the risks, warn you not to engage the practices, because often there's a key element left out that is only shared from the guru to the initiate, that if you don't have a guide, you actually could get some pretty disastrous results. And I'm sharing that because in the West, we like to think that if we if we read a text and then we try and just copy it verbatim, or if we go to one person's workshop, suddenly we're an expert in this. You see this all the time with people in the NeoTantra world. They'll go to like a one-day workshop or a weekend workshop on awakening the G-spot and female ejaculation, and then they think they can teach that. Now, it's a class I teach, and it's one of the most difficult classes I teach, because you're holding trauma for everybody in the room. You have to know yourself really intimately in that practice before you're ready to go and teach somebody else. How can you even hold self? Do you even have an understanding of trauma? Is it even your responsibility to bring that much juice into the room, to allow people's bodies and second chakras to open? So I actually love a lot of the warnings that I hear in classical tantra about slowing things down and being under the protection of a guru. And I'll give an example of when I was last in India. So I went to India last in, I think it was September 2019, for the Durga puja in Kolkata. And I was kind of warned before I went that it was going to be a very intense journey. And I had no idea what I was in for. It wasn't just the heat or the millions of people from all over India that had come to Kolkata for this, or the fact that we were in like really strict classical tantric puja for 10 days to Durga, who's one of my favorites, but she's an intense form of the goddess, kind of not to be messed with. And the form we were worshiping her in was Mahisha Mardani, where she is seen slaying the demon Mahisha. So she's like victorious in this battle. Anyway, it was very interesting to me how I learned, like a couple of days in, I got really, really triggered and activated, and I was crying, and I was there with Ekabumi, and I was like, oh my goodness, and I'm not being understood. And we were staying close to a very well-known temple called Kali Ghat, to the goddess Kali, who's even more intense than Durga. And there were a lot of people practicing Tantra. In Bengal, it is quite well known, and specifically here, because Kali Ghat is a Tantric temple. And this was no more, magic and rainbows and sunbeams bouncing off the walls. I literally couldn't leave my bedroom. I don't even mean go into other parts of the house. I mean, I couldn't even leave my bedroom without having all my energetic protection up, because there's also a lot of black magic practiced. There's animal sacrifice practiced at Kaligat. Like, it was hard for me to go there. I didn't even see the sacrifice, but I went to where they slaughter the animals, and you could feel the energy. Now, even in some parts of India, this would be considered totally taboo, but it's welcomed here. And so I realized I had to literally like suit up with my energetic armor and my energetic protection before I left my bedroom. Otherwise, I would be a crying mess on the floor in Ekabumi's room, which is what happened. So thankfully, he was skillful enough to just remind me, like, wow, you've got to take this seriously, because there are a lot of people practicing. So I'm sharing this because classical tantrikas hung out in the cremation grounds. There was a practice, I saw a recording from right before the last wave broke out in Varanasi, where people were worshiping Kali and worshiping Shiva, and they were taking ash from Manikarnika, which is the burning ghats, and smearing it on them. It was very intense. This is classical tantra. So depending on the form of the form of the goddess or god that you end up worshiping, we need to get away from this anesthetized view in the West that it's all kind of magic and rainbows. And that, people are wanting to conquer death even in this. So they will go to the cremation grounds. There's a sect called the Agoris, and they will drink wine and they will eat meat, which most Hindus don't do, or many Hindus don't do. And, they'll sacrifice animals and they will hang out with dead bodies. And I'm saying, for people that are just joining, I'll try and go a little more easy on you in a moment, coming at an interesting point of the discussion. But they are like trying to turn everything from poison into nectar, including things that are normally seen as taboo in Hinduism. So I'm going to go back to, there was a question about puja specifically. And I am going to assume that you and I both, it sounds like a ritual that you and I have both done with a totally different organization that doesn't claim to be NeoTantric specifically. But the person who brought this, I'm pretty sure we've done circles in the same. Okay. Yes, that's true. There are some teachers that teach it like this. So it's a beautiful thing to eye gaze with a beloved and then move, right? But classical tantric puja, there's no eye gazing. It's about the deity. It's going to look very, very different. There's going to be no touching. Men and women might even be separated, sitting on different sides, depending on where you sit. You would be dressed very demurely. Like, I wouldn't even wear a singlet. I'm wearing it because it was 100 degrees here today. But like, even if I was, this came up in the last chant for Caroline, I made sure my shoulders were covered because that would be the expectation in the temples in India. So that is a very, very Western interpretation of the word puja. I think how I made my peace with this was I actually stopped calling all my events pujas. Some of you who've studied with me for a while may notice. I call them neo-tantric rituals now. Because when I sat there really geeking out on it, and at the time I was doing a lot of classical tantric puja to stop, I'm saying so many inflammatory things tonight. Just take the energy down a bit. But I was doing a lot of advocacy around rape culture in the neo-tantra world. And we were doing classical tantric puja to pray for help and support for the victims, especially as they went to court and things. Anyway, and the reflection that a dear friend gave me was that, Caroline, for you, I can see that you are holding the ritual as puja. I can see that you are worshiping everybody. And when you invite people to chant mantra at the beginning, or when you talk about the deities, for you, that is an alive relationship. But is that true? Is everybody getting the unfiltered definition through you? And when I realized that that was potentially not true for every person in the room, I stopped using the word puja for classical tantric ritual, for neo-tantric rituals, and I just called them that. I just rebranded things. Same experience, but now I'm honoring, I'm honoring source tradition. Because and I do have many Indian students, but if you plucked somebody out of India and put them in one of my classes and you invited them to a puja, they would not know that they were coming to a neo-tantric experience. So, what I'm hoping, I'm not trying to be the neo-tantra police, but what I am trying to do is to model a different way and a different use of languaging. Like I used to use the word tantra for neo-tantra, and I realized it wasn't the same. Like I did enough inner working. I'm like, I can't even use this word anymore, right? So it does get complicated because I do weave in aspects of classical tantra, but I use neo-tantra specifically so that it's delineating from what I'm trained in doing. And I'm using my words to delineate. I'm teaching something different. There are some vague similarities to some of the classical practices, but it's actually quite different. Yeah, okay. I'm going to keep going through because our time is just, yeah, I don't think somebody's asking, is there a problem with sacred Saturdays or celebration evenings? I think that's lovely. Those are English words. I think that's fine. I've noticed since I've been very public about my journey, and I use neo-tantra all the time, like on social media, for example, and in all my mail outs, that some of the teachers are slowly starting to change. But I had to stop teaching with one beloved colleague because after a year, she wouldn't use the word neo-tantra and kept using tantra. And I was like, it's not aligned for me anymore. So, so I just want to welcome, I know we've had a new participant joining us. I'm not using names just in case people want confidentiality on this, because that's really important to me. There are still some questions here, but you are welcome to put a question in the chat, or if you're feeling brave and want to come on camera, we'll take some of those too. I'm just reading one of the comments. Yes, well, that's somebody's saying that they attended something called a Tantra workshop, and it was sweet and soft and good and helped them feel energy more. All of that's wonderful. But I think it would be more appropriate to call it neo-tantra. And the trick is, you see, even people like Osho called it tantra. And that's where things started going awry. Yeah. Osho is problematic in and of himself. That's another whole journey. But it was very popularized because a lot of the Westerners came back, and like Margot Anand and Deborah Pramal, and then just started using his languaging because that's what they'd taught. So this is the problem when we deviate from source teachings, then they can get diluted. And then there's this misunderstanding. So, okay, please relate MS dynamics to bhakti and tantric practice. Wow, big question. Okay, I'm going to use it. I am going to answer this question. I'm going to say, how does an MS or master-slave dynamic relate to bhakti and tantric practice? And I'm going to assume you're talking about neo-tantra, because most classical tantrikas that I know would have very little to do with BDSM. I only know of one Just make sure that's true. Yeah, I personally know of one that isn't opposed to it, but he wouldn't put those practices together at all. So one of the exercises that I love to do, I love power exchange, and in general, I tend to explore it from a dominant submissive perspective more than from a master slave perspective, because that's just my jam. And yeah, anyway, so is it okay if I speak about it from a dominant submission versus a master slave perspective? Is that okay with you? Okay. So I was talking a little earlier about, and this actually ties in with one of the comments from somebody else about energy. So there is a lot of energy that happens in classical Tantra, but because people can just follow the outer teachings and the rituals, and if you just copy and repeat, you actually probably will get the desired results, even if you don't understand anything about energy. Some Hindus just, copy and paste and rinse and repeat and do the same thing. Results will be fine. But there is an energetic component whether people are aware of it or not. So in NeoTantra, there's quite a lot of focus on the energy. You're often trying to raise energy, right? And that's where the breath, sound, and the movement. I'm rolling my pelvic floor back and forth, or rocking my pelvis back and forth. And if we take this aspect, I've talked about like offering, putting your hands in Anjali Mudra and bowing. We do a lot of that in NeoTantra. You bow to the person across from you. Now, in my understanding, both in DS and MS, so in dominance and submission and master-slave relationships, the best kinds of connections, when it's in its healthiest form, is when the dominant and the submissive, or the master and the slave, are actually in service to each other. They are actually worshiping each other. So if you are boot blacking or cleaning someone's toilet is not my idea of submission, but service submission like that is some people's. Mine would be, and I do this in the Black Diamond ritual, is let me kneel before you. So let me kneel submissively before you, but gaze up at the dominant with absolute devotion. And the dominant gazing down at the person kneeling before them, receiving that honoring, that sacred energy exchange. Oh, I'm watching people get goosebumps. I love it. Yes. And that's intense, because what I notice in the kink community is people don't eye gaze that often. Some people do, but not necessarily. And there's an intimacy that comes even just from the eye gazing. So it's actually a very, thank you for the hearts, it's a very profound experience. And because I resonate with being a tantrika, we like to break rules a lot of the time. The neo-tantrics are famous for this. But, even the classical tantrikas don't play to the general rules and norms of society. They step outside of that. Somebody's saying it's hard to eye gaze in a hood, depending on the style of hood, but yes. But even if we, talk about hoods, that'll get me all hot and bothered. But if we think of an example of the hood, you can still channel, even if you couldn't see the eyes, you could gaze up in the direction of your dominant, offering your body, your heart, your gaze, your attention, your devotion to the dominant, right? Even as you're kneeling there. The most erotic experience I ever had, if I have to pick one, was I was with a lover at the time, and he was my dominant, and he had me kneel naked in front of him, but across the room. And he sat very relaxed on the couch, watching me for quite a long time. He didn't touch me, but he kept his eyes and his attention focused exquisitely on me. And my yoni got more and more turned on until she was dripping with desire, because I could feel his eyes on me and his enjoyment of objectifying me. So I was in an aspect of devotion. I was on my knees. I was in a submissive position. Yes, it was incredibly hot. It was incredibly simple. It was also incredibly frustrating because I wanted to like do something, and he wouldn't. He just sort of left me there. He did things to me later. But anyway, so so I love that example, because if somebody said, oh, you know, strip and just kneel before me, like if you just said casually like that, it could be nothing. But this was maybe a 20-minute practice that took us very, very deep. So again, I'm playing with these concepts in quite modern ways, but I like what somebody's saying here. Doing puja with your master, you are worshiping him as the deity. Now, I happen to resonate with that very deeply, and that is a very advanced practice. So when I give sessions to my students, this ends up being public anyway, I'm probably going to get crucified for saying this, but anyway, I literally treat it, and when I'm doing sexual sadhana, so sexual practices with my private students, I literally hold it as if I'm worshiping the body of Krishna, and I'm offering puja to that body. That may not be why the student has come, it may not be their orientation, but I'm literally worshiping every inch of their human flesh temple. So you can do that, and it's very deep. It's very deep. I mean, Ramdas teaches on this as well. Maharaji gave him the instruction, Nimkroli Baba gave him the instruction to love everybody, and his response was, I can't do that. It is a hard practice to love everybody. He said, love everybody and tell the truth. Well, it's easy if you're hot for somebody, or it's easy if you have somebody you've been a beloved with for years. But what about the people that challenge you on your shit? What about the dominant that asks you to do something that's really edgy for you? And I'm not talking about boundary violations, but these things, it then becomes even this path of truth. We talked about it a lot at the last chant with me, because we chanted a mantra all about truth, moving from the darkness to the light, from the untruth to the truth, and from poison to nectar. That's actually very in line with what we're talking about today. That is edgy as So you want to be mindful kind of what you're engaging, because I would start first with the deity. Like start with the deity or start with a mantra and really weave that in. How can I learn even what puja actually means from people who know, before I take what I'm going to say is the bastardized version that is often offered in NeoTantra. And still, please, I do whole videos on cock worship. There's one on my YouTube channel you can go and check out. Like, yes, you can still make it into a sacred experience, but it's very hard not to get distracted and to hold back the whole way through. So I want to make room. We have a new person who's just joined us, who hasn't had an opportunity to ask a question. So we are recording. You missed that part, but we are recording. So if you want to ask in the chat, you're welcome to. I'm probably only going to take one or maximum two more questions before we close tonight. So we've already covered a lot of ground. Well, just for your benefit, I showed one participant earlier, but I think we had a bit of a tech glitch. So I'm coming to you live from Mexico, from my home. here, and I'm going to move off screen because the camera focuses on me and then you can't see. Look at that view. I don't even know if you can see the sea so well, but that's the sea right up there. I love living here so much. I'm coming back in October. I'm leaving for hurricane season and coming back in October. But part of why I'm coming back is I could teach outside here and we can gaze out at that gorgeous view. So I've got a lot in the works thinking about where can I do retreats in Mexico for you all, and about doing a teacher training out here and maybe even some trainings for people that are local. So yes, I am at your service if you have any more questions before we wrap up. Oh, thank you so much. I'm really, really glad that that you're enjoying it. I'm sorry you didn't hear the preamble because you came in at a very intense part of the conversation. How am I doing with my explanation for you, Carolyn? Is it holding true? Okay, good. As I'm answering, I'm thinking of all the people that could be watching this and how they would criticize what I say. Okay, so there's a question. What does it mean to give mantra? Yeah. Wow. Okay, so again, I feel quite unqualified to answer this, so I will be answering it in a layperson's explanation. I'm sure there are people much more qualified than me to answer. But for example, in kirtan, in call and response chanting, when you either tune into a kirtan, you attend one, or you listen to one, basically what they are singing is names of God in the Hindu tradition, right? And if God or goddess freaks you out, one of my teachers calls it capital L, love. So you can just think you're connecting to love. That's a great way to think of it. That is, you are not being given a mantra. A practice is not being assigned to you to do. You're singing the names of God. And by doing that, you invoke the deity and you hopefully get darshan. You get an experience of their presence. And the more you do it and the more you develop a relationship, the chances are it's more likely that they will show up in a reliable way. Being given a mantra, often you receive a mantra from a guru, and normally, if I've understood this correctly, it would be a diksha guru. So diksha is like transmission from the guru, and often you have to have done a whole series of practices, at least in the Orthodox traditions. You would have had to have proved to the guru that you are worthy of receiving this mantra. And it's often a secret between you and the guru. You don't tell anybody else. And it is like your personal practice that they are assigning you, either for a period of time or perhaps for a lifetime. It's considered quite a big deal. It's kind of like making, is that true? I was going to say it's kind of like making a vow, but it's forming quite a deep bond with this particular teacher. And if you've taken initiation from them, then really they are willing to take on your karma. So if let's imagining you're doing classical tantric practice, for example, and you get in some hot water and some demons come after you or whatever, the guru will go into the bardos or whichever dimension it needs to go into, the hell realms, and save your ass because you don't know anything. You don't know enough yet, right? Somebody that's just sharing a mantra with you, like those that we would chant in a kirtan, some of them have a little, again, I want to be careful, but like a little less power to them and a little, let's say some are easier to work with than others. So for example, I believe one of you was in that clubhouse room with Ekabumi last weekend, and somebody was asking, could they share a mantra with the group? And he said, you can share anything as long as it doesn't have a bija mantra, bija meaning seed sound. And he was specifically saying the bijas for the deities, right? And the reason for that is that carries extra juice. It's like it's the seed like the root of the whole deity, just in that one word. So he wanted to really be mindful, from my understanding, of not amping the room up with too much energy, and also not causing too much attention. These practices actually do work. So if we're chanting the mantras, we want to be mindful what we are invoking and who we are invoking, and to have a teacher that can sort of set us back into alignment if we're veering off the path in an unhealthy way. So my understanding is you get mantra from a Diksha guru. Normally you have to have qualified in some way, either through practices, or you've got to prove that you're ready to receive that kind of an energetic transmission. And it's a very special, sacred thing. It's not sort of done, well, in general. You don't take it lightly, because it's a commitment that you're going to make to keep chanting this normally every day. Yeah. So now that I knew this question was going to come. So yes, I was leading bija mantras. Sorry, and I'm trying to keep up with the chat. I was leading what's called a Buddha Shuddhi practice, which is basically a clearing practice for the energy body, specifically for the chakras. And I have been trained in this by multiple people. So it's a way to just literally turn your chakras on. And I learned it first from a Westerner, and then actually got the tantric pronunciation from Dr. Vaji Shastriji in India. And I feel safe enough because I've worked with that. I'm also not giving a mantra. These mantras are fully available. When I'm talking about bija mantras for the deities, that's where things start getting more problematic. And not that, like, I often share the Om Gang Ganapataye Namaha. So the Gang, and I'm using Anuswara, so tantric pronunciation. The Gang is a bija for Ganesha, but Ganesha is like a very easily approachable deity. He's a safe one to work with. So I feel fine about that. And other tantrikas more learned than I might say more. So yes, I definitely am not qualified to give mantra to anybody. Yeah, so I'm pausing because I don't, like, I can see how I'm contradicting myself. Giving somebody a mantra and saying, I want you to chant 20,000 rounds of this, or however many, every day, and I want you to only focus on this deity. I don't do any of that. That is giving a mantra and putting you in relationship with a deity. I have no business doing that. But chanting mantras that are often chanted at kirtan, or that I've studied in India, and we're doing it in a much more informal way, for me, that feels safe enough. And I've also studied with some teachers that are like Gina Salah. She's not so worried about, she does, but Dr. Vaji Shastriji is her Guruji. That's how I was introduced to him. And she's more relaxed about some of the rules. So, okay, and then somebody was saying, oh, I was given a Vaishnavite mantra by my guru. Is it appropriate to give this mantra while performing puja on my master? Oh, wow. I often think of him as Krishna. I love hearing this and getting to know you more. I won't out your name, but of him as a Krishna representative who has many gopis, and I want to go deeper with him in our connection. I think I would answer it in this way. That if at all possible, I would go back to the guru. If you wanted to message me directly and tell me who it is, and you don't have to do that, but it might help me to know. I'm just not remembering in this moment. I would do the sadhana or the practice. Sadhana is like a daily practice. I would do it in whichever ways the guru, I'm assuming it's a man, but I don't know that for sure, has given you instruction to do it, and I would not deviate from that. I would ask them specifically if it would be appropriate to offer to your master. I don't know enough details about the connection with your master, but I'm going to answer it kind of from a neo-tantric perspective and say, so I love teaching practices like sex magic. I use sex magic frequently with my private students. I use it when we go into neo-tantric ritual. And the way I like to think of sex magic is we set an intention or a samkalpa, and then we infuse it with energy. So the word sex magic is a little bit misleading in that sex magic could happen with a candle, could happen with incense, could happen with a mantra. It doesn't always have to involve something sexual. It's any time, in my view, that you're raising the energy. The neo-tantrics just like to use sex, but that's certainly not the only way to do it. So it's a very, very potent practice, but you really have to know what you're doing, right? And so when I have students come to me to work with me, I know how to hold it correctly for them. But if they want to go and do sex magic with their partner, then I'd be like, well, hang on a second. So what is your relationship to them? Are you fluid bonded? Are you married? Are you in a deep, committed personal connection? Do you own a house together? Are you very seriously committed together? Because doing sex magic together starts binding your karma together. So like, do you really want to weave more deeply with this person? So we want to be very mindful when we are using such advanced practices. Like, do we actually realize how profound the energetics are behind it? I actually don't have intercourse with a lot of people anymore. Very intentionally, I'm not making intercourse wrong, but I now understand the energetics behind that practice, and I don't want to do that with just anybody. I am not slut shaming anybody. I've been really slutty in my life, so please, if you are just opening up your sexuality, please go ahead, be as poly or as open or engage in as much fuckery as you like. But for me, at my stage of evolution, I'm incredibly mindful walking into that because I really understand at a deep level the energetics behind it. So I have very deep respect for that. And that's why I'm referring you back to the guru that gave you the mantra. And if they are not in a physical body anymore, I hope you still have relationship with them, but you can go and ask, right? You can ask on the airwaves. I've only met Neem Karoli Baba since he dropped his body, and I still have a very strong and deep connection with him. Yes. So somebody messaged me. I can't tell which is private and which is not, but just commenting saying, with a question we've just addressed, when yes, I love this. So I love what your guru said. Yes, the subtle bodies blend. They come together in a very, very deep way. Yes, it's one physical part in another physical part of our orifice you're choosing to engage. And it's very deep. Like Maharaji would often say to his devotees, oh, you're friends. Like right after they'd had sex, oh, now you must get married. Because it's that deep, we forget about that. And I'm not saying every time you have to have sex, you have to marry someone. But we want to kind of hold, this is very, very deep and intimate. And have as much sex as you like. But for me, there's a different threshold when I engage intercourse. And yes, he said, you are married. That's right. So just to go into it with the same reverence is what I recommend. What one of the participants was sharing was that you are not giving mantra to your master, you are using the mantra that you were given. And I agree with that, but I'm still saying, check with the person who gave you the sadhana, who gave you the mantra. Is this the way you intended for me to use this practice? Do you feel that I'm skillful enough to do that? Because I love sexuality, but it's like fire. It's like when you see neo-tantric teachers doing psychedelics with neo-tantric practices. I would never engage that with students because it's too much fire. Way too much fire. There's enough fire in neo-tantra alone. So yeah, that's why I'm deferring to the guru. I'm not even going to mess with that anymore, if that makes sense. So I'm just reading here. Oh, this is so lovely. May I read the comment out? Person that just messaged me directly. I hope that that's a yes. Oh, thank you. Okay. Trying to do the consent piece because that's really important too. One of the participants was sharing, for me, as a past and possibly future. Oh, I see. I'm really glad I did check. But there's somebody sharing that they have been a full service sex worker in the past and may do so in the future. It is possible to shield energetically and become a hollow bone. Using NeoTantra as a way of transforming just fucking into something healing and transcendent, even if the other participants are not exactly aligned. The little bits that I know of you, I can see how you can hold this. And I would be very curious, and this is perhaps a conversation for another time, but just to make sure that you are ensuring your seekers, the people that come and see you, don't get hooked into you. And even I have to work quite hard. I only do hands-on, I don't offer full service. And I still have to get a lot of people's energy off me. And I have a whole lot of practices I do. I have teachers watching me. So I would just really, no judgment at all in the choice of practice, but what I'd most like to see is you being safe and you able to make sure that other people, I'm an empath, so maybe this is just my bias, but people tend to hook into me and I often have to disentangle that. So just be very mindful of having shields up and doing so from an empowered place. But if you're able to do that, then more power to you. We should talk more offline. I may have referrals for you. Seriously, because I don't offer full service. So love that. Love it that they're more conscious and awake sex workers in the world. So I think because of all the juice in this conversation, I want to lead us through a little grounding exercise before we wrapped up. We've talked about agoris and we've talked about cremation grounds and classical tantra and sexual sadhana and bija mantras and oh my goodness, and Kali and we're not going to sing tonight, but I love it that you want to sing. We're not. I don't have my harmonium all set up. Or anything, but I know we have chanting coming up. I just don't remember it in my head. Let's ground first and then I can speak to that. So it would be great if wherever you are, you could come to sitting so we can follow the practice together and place both of your feet flat on the ground. And with each exhalation, just allowing yourself to settle and your weight to spread out as you take up space on the seat on which you are living. Sitting as well, not just living, but sitting. And then I want you to put your attention in your feet, on the soles of your feet, and feel how they touch either the earth or your carpet or the inside of your shoes, but feel how they spread out and connect to the earth. And then from your tailbone, I want you to imagine that growing longer and extending out. Also, now touching the earth. So you're doing that just with your imagination or intention. So I could see this tripod of 3 parts of self energetically connecting into the ground. And let's penetrate the earth with those 3 points from the soles of the feet, and that extension from the tailbone, and come down 1.5 feet below the surface of the earth. One of the lineages I study in, we call this the 8th chakra, 1.5 feet below the surface of the earth. And from there, kind of imagining like a bowling ball is the image that's coming to mind, but something really heavy, dropping into the sea and just descending down effortlessly, inviting your attention deeper and deeper towards the center of the earth. Putting your attention all the way in, planting it into the earth right at the core. And anything that's felt like too much, or any stress from the day, or anything that isn't you, that you just want to compost, with each exhalation, just allowing the earth to absorb it, letting it soak into the earth, run off your body. Anybody's energy that's not yours, anything that doesn't resonate with your frequency, just let that be composted and transformed by the earth. And then allowing the earth to rise up to meet you. Often when we become overwhelmed, we've lost our connection to the earth. And remembering how small you are and how vast the earth is. Feeling how held and supported you are. And notice what it feels like to be held, supported, and connected to the earth once more. When you're ready, you can gently open your eyes. I did that a lot in India, just like remembering, I was like, oh, the ground, the earth feels different here to me. And Kolkata feels so intense, but the earth is always with me. It doesn't matter where I am. And I can take my overwhelm down. So that's a quick grounding. I love it that you want to sing. We're not going to sing tonight, but we will be chanting. So I offer chant with Caroline once a month. The next one will be the 29th of June will be the next time. So it's only a couple of weeks to wait. And just to let you know what's coming up next Tuesday, it is Pride Month. I know I'm not the only one celebrating on this call, so it's Pride Month. And I'm bringing in a friend of mine that I know from the community, I actually discovered NeoTantra in. And their name is Indigo Dawn, and we're going to be talking about the ABCs of being LGBTQ. I wrote it wrong in my calendar. Anyway, what I want for this is, again, for people to come curious, especially if the whole LGBTQ there are many more letters that can keep being added in, but it's a place for people to come and ask questions, all the things you never felt safe enough to ask, the uncomfortable things. They're like, oh, can I even ask this? Both Indigo and I are very open-minded and are willing to share with you in a non-judgmental space. And I know there's some of you that are well-versed in these things. If you want to bring more advanced questions, I know Indigo will know. I often refer to myself as a baby queer. I'm very straight passing, and I do identify as queer, but we can talk more about what that means for me next Tuesday. You guys are so amazing. I am so honored to get to spend time with you this evening. Some of you I'm getting to meet for the very first time, and I love that. Some of you come every time, and I love that too. The recording, I'll make the recording available hopefully in the next few days to people that are on my Hanuman heart tier and above. We covered some pretty deep subjects tonight. I love that. I never know what you'll bring. But really, it literally is helping me to both heal from a lot of the challenges of the last few years, being here in Mexico, and your contributions on Patreon really even make this possible. I'm living pretty simply, but I do have this, can't see it anymore, but this gorgeous ocean view. And I'm very excited to, when it feels safe enough to start inviting people down here to share in the magic. And literally, I see mobula rays jumping in the sea, and we saw these beautiful dolphins. So I want people to be able to come to that, because nature has been a very deep part of my nourishment, especially in the last year. So thank you. Mwah. So we'll look forward to lots more soon. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the love. Oh, that'd be great if you message me. You don't have to. Some people are private about that, but I would love to know. Yes, and I hope you'll all join us next Tuesday. I will let you know. I'm actually let's stop the recording for a second. Hang on. Oh, not stop video, stop recording. Okay.